Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. It's Charlie Hedges here, and I am so happy that we are in our new digs at the University of California, Irvine's Applied Innovation Center. And I am really curious with your move. As I've come in and taken a look, this is my first entrance into the office, and you say a 12 by 12, I say a 10 by 10.
It was a cell.
It was very tiny. And you have 2 complete offices,
right,
with an entire outside full of desks, full of stuff. I do not understand. It is incomprehensible for me that you had all that stuff in that little office. You know the story of Jesus and the multiplying fish and loaves? That's what I got. The more he passed around, the more it just kept multiplying. I can't believe it either. All of that stuff, it was jammed in one little room, and I'm struggling to get it in 2 bigger rooms. Yeah, it really is a miracle gospel here. I think, because the amount of stuff, you're going to have fish and loaves left over that you're going to have to find. You're going to have to find home for, because I think so. There's not room, and you have 2 offices that are both larger than your office previously. Go figure. I don't get this. In one of our chats some time ago, we talked about clutter and stuff. And you are definitely on the top of my list as the stuff king. That's right. You never know. Well, today, Paul, I'm going to talk about a subject that my listeners know that is very dear to my heart, and that is all about the meaning of life. And I would like you to not say, "Oh my goodness, just Charlie and another meaning of life lecture." This is very different, and it's very important. As you may know, I'm a big fan of Dr. Jordan Peterson, a Canadian professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, and in the last 5 years, Peterson has become one of the most popular and widely renowned speaker and author. He's got millions of followers on YouTube, Twitter, and he has a thoughtful approach. It appears as if he's conservative, but he really is not. He considers himself a liberal. He's plain thoughtful, and he gives really thoughtful ideas. I saw him on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has him on a lot. And what did you think of him? I thought he's hard to pigeonhole. On one hand, he preaches some old school traditional values, particularly about men and women. But on the other hand, when you hear him explain his position, it's pretty thought out. It's really well thought through. Yeah. It feels. I kind of feel like I do in our discussion of politics today that I really am hard to pigeonhole, because I see the positives and the negatives of both, and it is really so troubling to me that I really can't be a strong proponent of either, and I'm feeling like I'm left to my current values, where what is most important to me, and what endangers what I believe, and I'm not going out and saying what I believe, what I don't believe, but just say it is a time. I encourage everybody during this time, and this is an aside, to do research of both political parties, both political candidates, and try to get information as you can from primary sources rather than from the pundits, because the pundits all are so prejudiced and well, it's spin. I was in PR for years. The spin rules on both sides. You try and spin the ball so in tennis, if you hit the ball one way, it spin. If you put a spin on it, it flies right. If you put another spin on it, it flies left. That's what they've been practicing and perfecting for years. The art of the spin. And the art of the spin in one side will talk about the other side so dramatically negatively, while the one speaking talks about we're the king of the world, and it is just very troubling. But that's a whole other subject. But Jordan Peterson is a good thinker. I've listened to him live.
He makes you think. First he makes you mad, and then he makes you think.
Yeah, well, he doesn't make me mad, but he makes me think.
I mean, he makes a lot of. For example, I saw a debate he did with a lot about men, and he always
with
says, "Well,
Kathy Newman in
Kathy
England."
yeah.
Well, he just nailed her. I mean, it was.
And she was so mad by the end of this thing here, and he was like, "I'm not trying to make you mad, but okay, I'm gonna make you mad.
I'm just going to give you facts." Yeah, the equality of opportunity versus the equality of outcome, and that's a very difficult debate that we're not going to get into. So
right.
Today, as I said, we are going to talk about the meaning of life, and Jordan Peterson has a YouTube video that I'm going to post. It's only 20 minutes, and it is so worth your time. And it's titled The Meaning of Life, but it goes much beyond just that sort of trite concept of the meaning of life. And he offered some very fresh ideas that got me thinking about the meaning of life from a whole different filter.
Okay.
And so
because he seems to advocate kind of a code. Let's go back to the man's code. Let's go back to what my father would say. You just knew what was right and wrong. There was sort of an intrinsic, deep-seated belief.
He's very big on that. But he brought up in this YouTube video some new points. I'm familiar with those, the new points. And so today, what I want to do is talk about how often we preach the idea of a meaningful life, and we do it from a sort of philosophical mission statement, sort of this high ideal of what is the mission of life, and using this, what I'm calling O2 grandiose language. And today, Dr. Peterson got me thinking more of the meaning of life in everyday matters. Everyday things that we are dealing with. In other words, what do I do on an hour-by-hour basis that attributes to a life worth living well? And I think that's really critical, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm for all these causes, I'm for that." How are you dealing with the people next to you? How are you dealing with your life today? What are you implementing in your life that creates a sense of something we're going to be calling much later a noble aim, and I've for now titled this podcast "In Pursuit of a Normal Aim." And to get into this,
did you say normal or noble?
I said normal and meant noble.
That's what I thought. Right.
Thank you for the correction. A noble aim. There's no such thing as a normal aim.
A normal aim. I think I got a pretty normal aim.
Yeah, normal aim. Yeah, give me a beer and and a game, and I'm okay.
That's right.
Now, to get into this, for everyone, producer Paul and I will discuss this meaning of life on a much more granular level, dealing with the day-to-day, rather than this grandiose mission statement. So I would like to begin with, what is the problem? And so, Paul, I'm going to surprise you to start with you. And in your opinion, when we come to granular level of meaning of life, in your opinion, what comes to mind when you think of this ever so tired concept of the meaning of life?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you raise it, because we just did a show earlier with this morning, and I'm going to tie two totally different things together. That's what I love to do. She was on the show talking about how she has chosen to become a unattached nomad. Sold her house, gave away all of her stuff, and all she does is travel now. She travels from her different kids' houses. She travels to her friends' houses. She travels to exotic places. She lives out of hotels. She has no permanent location. This way she's going to spend the rest of her life. And I said, wow, that's pretty radical.
That's what I call a grandiose mission.
Yes, wow. That's a radical, grand vision. And she brought up a concept I'd never heard about. I wish I could remember the name of the book that she quoted. And it essentially is the language of love. How in sort of language of what's important to you. We'll call it she called it the language of love. For some, they feel loved if you give them something. You give them a present or whatever. Give them some tangible thing. Give them a little thoughtful gift. That shows love. For others, it's time. That was what, for me, my late great father was so busy all the time. If he gave you any of his time, you felt loved, because he worked 90 hours a week. He was gone all the time. So, and there are other things you could, whether you help people, that's how you show them you love. You help people in Africa, so you're showing them by your actions what you do for them. She said there are about 4 or 5 of these language of love things. And I can't help but think it's the same kind of thing that you're talking about. What's important in life to you? Where do you focus on? We can all come up with a grand plan, but in the end of the day, what are you going to do tomorrow? Are you going to help somebody? Are you going to spend time with somebody? Or are you going to give money to something tomorrow? When the rubber hits the road, what are you going to do to make life matter, to make your noble cause?
That's I think that's really good insight, and I will continue to harp throughout the podcast. That is not what are you doing over the course of a year, but what are you doing over the course of a day, or the course of a week, or perhaps a month. And one of the things Dr. Peterson brings up that I so fully endorse, and that is there is this battle that's going on. It's an internal battle, and it's part of our left brain, right brain hierarchy, hardwiring, and that's we are definitely hardwired for a need for security.
Yeah.
That we want to feel secure in what we're doing. However, we cannot exist fully, meaningfully, without the necessary discomfort of insecurity. We must have insecurity. That's where noble aim comes from. That's where meaning of life and those sorts of pursuits come from. It's from not attaining these things, not having these things, and knowing there's something missing in our life that our security can't fail. So is nobility, I got to stop you there because that's a pretty radical thought. You're saying that see if I can even restate this, that it's we all want to be secure, and that usually means happy. I'm happy because I got food, I got shelter, I got the basic needs covered in Maslow's hierarchy. But it's when I get insecure, it's when I get out of my comfort zone, that's when you say the noble aim takes place? Yes, absolutely. See, and if you take a look at Maslow's chart, what you just described as security is levels 1 and 2 of a 8 or 9 level hierarchy. But
most of us live our whole lives in the 1 or 2. We just want to be safe and secure and have things covered, and it's not an exciting life, but it's not a bad life. It's a safe and secure life.
But here's my question, Paul, with regarding to that, because you really lead me to a good question. If we indeed had everything we wanted in life, if we had money and relationships, I believe chances are, and so does Dr. Peterson, that we would most likely end up bored unless we had a purpose.
Yeah.
Unless there was something more, that there's a hole in us that needs to be filled. And all we have to observe in order to support that, it's one sort of very small data sampling, but that is people that win the lottery.
Yeah.
How long do yachts or houses or cars or money or fun satisfy them, and it's gone, and even when it's there, they're having to buy more. They're having to buy more.
Right.
It's part of it is we all have this hole in our psyche. There really is a hole in our psyche that can only be filled by something meaningful. There is something that and until we find an activity or cause or intention, we end up lost and discontent. If we end up going to a job and doing the same thing day in, day out, if we're in some repetitive sort of employment, it's difficult to find meaning in that. It's difficult to find growth and opportunity. And
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that, because that's a new. You and I both come from a post-World War II generation here. The generation that came before us our parents' era, my father's era, who fought World War II and went through the Depression. To him, I remember having this argument with him a couple of times in college, or I get out of college and I'm sort of wandering, and I'm like, I got to find myself, Dad. I got to find my purpose and passion. He said, why don't you just find an effing job? To him, work was meaningful. Any work. Boring factory work, anything. The lack of work was lack of purpose. Just getting up and going to work and paying the bills and supporting the family, because he came out of the Depression. There was no aspiration for anything greater than just to survive and not to give up. And so he could never, to the day he died, understand this, what you're talking about. I got to go find passion and purpose. He found meaning in the most meaningless things to me. He worked in factories. He worked in repetitive jobs. He did those things, but he never found it beneath him or meaningless, because it meant he was supporting a family and paying the bills and being a man.
And I think I would agree with your father and say that was, in those times with that history of experience,
right,
and where he was at, that did provide meaning. That was a meaning, but times change,
right,
and things are different, and that no longer is the driving goal of where we are at. That's not our ultimate achievement.
I agree, because we've moved up the Maslow's hierarchy, and we have those kinds of basic needs covered. We're not, for most of us, there are still way too many in America this does not apply to, even here in Orange County.
Absolutely.
But for most of us, or many of us, the people that we run with, the circles we run with, that basic need is covered. So now what? What else is going to get you up in the morning and get you excited and lend meaning to your life? It's not just, thank God I have a job and I can eat today here. Like in Africa. You said, how aspirational are some of these people in Africa that you meet? They're just trying to survive. And if they can survive, hooray, I won the lotto.
Yeah, and I think we see that politically, how aspirational are people without education, without chances. What is the aspiration for growth for them? When they look at their peers and they don't see it, there is not aspiration. So we are talking about more of a middle class sort of.
Once you get up, you can see, I can go a little higher. To use the hiking analogy, you can only see so far up the hill, and then until you climb up the hill, then you go, wow, I can go further. Gee, I just thought it would be enough if I could just get up to that first ridge. Boy, I can go a lot further than this. So your vision starts to open up. You see more possibilities. And that's when I think you need more meaning. And I will support you in this. For the first years of my business career, I worked in the entertainment industry. I represented some very famous celebrities, Johnny Mathis, Anthony Quinn. I was a PR person. And I saw, not those two, but so many that I knew who were so unhappy, that had everything.
Yeah. So let's go to Dr. Peterson, and let's go right to our subject matter, and let's go to noble aim.
Okay.
And Dr. Peterson suggests in this quandary of security and insecurity that we require security, but we have one foot in security and another foot in insecurity, which is building up, which is a building up of our esteem, our ego, our needs, our fulfillment in life, our making a difference in life. And in noble aim, it is something beyond ourselves. This is not a first half of life ego fulfillment necessarily. This is the noble aim. And I like to use the word discover and not create. We discover our noble aim, and I've talked about it is based on our history of experiences. And like your father, your father's noble aim was discovered based on what he went through in the Depression.
Yeah.
And he did not create that. He didn't go out and say, okay, what's my noble aim? This is my noble aim, is putting food on the table for my family,
right,
and having some sort of security for my family. This is a highly, highly, highly developed noble aim. But once we got to a point where most everybody was indeed a large percentage of people in the middle class were in fact providing food on their table. That wasn't quite enough. And he asks 3 questions, or that he says that we need to discover, not create, answers to what he calls the 3 W's. Where, why, and what. Where are we heading? What are we doing to get there? And why does it even matter?
Yeah,
if we can answer those 3 questions, where are we heading? Why are we trying to get there? And why does it even matter? And if we can address those questions the minute we get up in the morning, and this is part of our daily routine, this is part of what we have. And what I've decided is... And
I guarantee that my father, who lived maybe in his early 90s, never once thought about any of those issues when he got up in the morning.
No, because they weren't contemporary issues. They weren't issues of his time. Our culture changes. Our culture evolves. Our culture moves on.
My dad used to just say, get up in the morning and get started. For him, it was putting a suit on. When he put his suit on, he was like putting on a suit of armor. He's going to go out and do battle every day. And to him, that was a meaningful experience, whatever the battle was, whether it was just making it through the day or making some money or getting a little ahead. That was it.
Yeah, it's like, it sounds like my one of my absolute favorite authors, Frederick Buechner, in the 80s and 90s, is a writer. And that was what he did. He wrote for a living. He had an office. He would put a suit and a tie on every day to go in and write, because this was his job. This was the way he fulfilled his purpose. But he had a grander purpose than just making money off the books, that he was serving a culture. But he had to do it in his job. He couldn't do it like I do in shorts and a T-shirt.
Yeah, no, my dad was horrified because I used to wear shorts, and I still do. He says, you can't work like that. You gotta go somewhere, and you gotta be dressed, suited up, and ready for battle here.
I have frequently said in AA meetings, I live a charmed life. And there's been many parts of my life that have been very charmed, and there's been many parts of my life that have been atrocious. I mean, I've had my run-ins with the police. I've had my run-ins with addictions and my run-ins with abuse of power, lack of compassion toward men, women. I've got a gambit of all sorts of things in my life, but for me, in addressing the where, what, and why, there are 4 things in my life that give me purpose and impact my life every day. 3 of them impact my life every day. 1 of them impacts my life
every day. So there isn't a day that's just sort of I'm just lazy today, or this is just I'm going to zone out and watch TV, or I'm just going to go through the same routine today. Every day has to have meaning.
It doesn't have to, but it does, because that's my goal. That's my joy in life. See, I don't think meaning in life has to be. That's why I said you discover it. Has to be apart from yourself, but it is deeply ingrained within yourself, and when you do it, it's what brings joy, which brings happiness, which brings fulfillment. If it's a task you distaste, it may not be your meaning in life. And so mine are 4 things, and I can briefly mention them.
Okay.
1 is a very keen interest in spiritual direction, and that is my work with the contemplatives and the mystics is giving me a whole different view on spirituality apart from conservative Christendom. Now, it's Christian, but it is not conservative, in your face.
It's
literal.
more the Catholic tradition. The Catholics
I've got the Catholics that are saying, that are telling me all the time, you're more Catholic than we are.
Yeah,
they say,
really.
Yeah, but I can't buy all the theology. But but I am studying. I've studied Thomas Merton, St. John of the Cross, and St. Teresa of Avila, which are all Catholics. And now I'm going into an 8-week in-depth study of Teresa of Avila,
Right.
because I like with that, and I'm studying Bonaventure, who is another Catholic theologian.
Right.
So the Catholics have the corner on the market of spiritual direction.
Well, because that's what they focused on for centuries. It's that it wasn't like evangelicals talking about a personal relationship with God. It was a different kind of. It was a mystical. It was a deep within yourself. It's the tradition of monks and contemplative thinking and a different relationship with getting to know God.
It is more than intimacy. I mean, more than relationship. It is intimacy.
Right.
They go so far as saying divine union.
Yeah. Right.
Where you
two become one. Yeah.
Where you are through gifts of godliness and life, you have the ability to partake in the divine nature, which is a almost heretical thought, that you can partake in the divine
and I remember
nature.
the nuns trying to wrap my head around this. The nuns teaching us when I went to Catholic school as a kid, say, what's heaven like? And of course, we all think, I'm going to see everybody I know, or I'm going to have everything I want, or I'm going to play all day, whatever this fantasy. They say, no, you're in the presence of God. And that's going to be so incredible that's enough. And it's like, that doesn't sound very exciting.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't until, by God's grace, that I have been able to witness some of that, and I absolutely believe that. I concur with the Catholic nuns, that we would be satisfied in the presence of God. But
it's so awe-inspiring, so beyond what we can expect. It's just like this, ta-da, you're there, and oh my goodness, you can't.
You picture your most ecstatic experience on divine steroids.
Yeah, right.
So the second thing, I have spiritual direction is very important to me. That is daily. I won't talk about the number of times.
But you have a routine.
Daily.
I mean, you actually go through and start your day and spend a considerable amount of time focusing on today's spirituality.
It's not just one time a day. It's 3 times a day.
3 times a day. So you're like the monks. Don't they get the monks that get called?
They have offices, but they have 6 or 7 offices a day. I have 3.
I go to an office once a day.
Well, they're called offices. That's the divine offices.
I don't start. I try and, honest to God, I do try and say morning prayers, which is an old school idea, and try and think through the day a little bit. But if I spend 15 minutes on the 5 minutes, that's a long time.
15 minutes is wonderful, because it's not just, I don't want to get into the spiritual part too deeply, because I have other things to say, but it is not just petitionary prayer. I'm not just asking God to serve me. I am asking God to get rid of my selfish self, my ego, so I can merge more with my true self that is at one with God. And so that calls for deep contemplation. Now, don't think I don't suffer immense distractions in the midst of that.
I'll bet.
My mind going all over the damn where. But God is honoring that right now. And so, anyway, let's just leave it at that. I don't want to go deeper into that. So that's one of your priorities to find. So the second one is...
That's your noble aim every day.
One of my noble aims. The second one is active involvement in helping the poor and disenfranchised. And my poor and disenfranchised happen to be in Africa and India. And that takes, not including financial support, but my time and physical support, between 10 and 25 hours a week. So every day I am working with Wells of Life, and I'm working on some kind of thing that can improve the health and welfare. We're moving into becoming not only a water organization, but a public health organization.
Right.
Where we are
building sanitation, right?
Well, sanitation, but we're building in schools. We're building sanitation and hygiene teaching. We're offering latrines. We're offering water stations, hand washing stations for COVID. We provide feminine hygiene materials. Mm-hmm. All of this for schools. It's a big effort, and we're really moving on that effort right now. That will be a 2021 initiative.
I applaud you because, in all honesty, I do not spend every day or probably many days trying to help the poor or those around me. I aspire to. I'd love to, but life intrudes, and I got to get dressed and get in the car and get going and get to work and.
Well, this is where it is good for you to ponder what are those things to discover within you. What are those things that are important in service? And I would argue that your service and what you're trying to do with these new studios and the goals that you have are really service-oriented goals. And I think those are noble aims. I think those are noble aims for you, and
they feel like it. They do have a noble feel to. I feel like I'm trying to aspire to not just help me and make more money, but to raise a level of consciousness and awareness and discussions, open up dialogue that nobody's having in ways that we're not having.
Tell me how you wake up in the morning with those goals. You wake up very differently than when you had no goals, when you had just the same old. Now you've got a
very energizing. Can't wait to get started. Exciting feel. I'm in my mid-60s. I thought I was in the long fade to black, to use a movie analogy. But I feel for the first time in a long time that I feel like there are new possibilities. I'm at the cutting edge. I'm at the front edge again here. It feels exciting to be innovating.
That's incredible. And so I happen to fall into Wells of Life, and I buy into the mission. I buy into our increased mission of women and children in schools, and latrines where we're building private latrines for girls with private stalls, so they are no longer mocked for their feminine hygiene times. They have washrooms, and with COVID and with just general hygiene, we're providing these hand washing stations that have 4 spigots that they can, with soap, that we're providing soap, that they can keep clean and can hopefully prevent the spread of this virus.
Everybody listening, I'm sure, has the same reaction that I had. Mind-boggling. You mean girls don't have separate bathrooms?
No.
Soap isn't readily available?
No, neither is hand washing. No. And so the boys will take over the current latrines. And so the boys, they will be doorless routines. They're boys. They can just go in and pee in a hole because they're just 6 by 12-inch holes in the ground. They are not toilets. But we have handrails in the new ones that the girls can use handrails to lean down. It's really a sophisticated latrine that's really quite exciting.
This is a handrail that lets you so you don't have to squat.
Well, you have to squat, but you can hold on to something.
Hold on to something.
Yeah.
Right? Wow.
Yeah, it's really very exciting.
It's a different world. Right.
And so, a third one for me, and this is one for everyone. It's a support of and I want to put immediately family.
Right. My
abundant support of my wife and my son and his wife are absolutely essential. That I do that every day. My son, as you know, is in baseball, struggling in baseball. I mean, he's doing incredible, but he just has issues. I only send positive emails or texts to him. Only positive. Never, why didn't you do this? Why didn't the team do that? I don't say that. I only give him positive.
Boy, too many sports fathers are the opposite. It's nothing about the 10 good things you did today. It's the one bad catch you made or the one thing you missed today.
And you know how much he talks to me? Talks to me all the time.
Yeah, right.
And he views my wisdom. And also I attribute to him wisdom, and there are things that I can learn from him. I learned some things from him last week that was very, very important. And so the fourth thing for me, just to see that, I am blessed with a filled life, and that is I have an opportunity to share the ideas we're talking about right now on the search for meaning, adventure, and awe with the next chapter with Charlie.
Yeah.
Now, that's only 2 or 3 days a week.
Right.
But with you take that spiritual direction, helping the poor and disenfranchised, especially in today's sort of mindset.
I'll say it's the all about me world. Yeah,
and we're all of people of color.
Right.
This is all we serve are people of color.
Right.
And my support for my family, and my opportunity to share with my friends these ideas. That keeps me. Those are noble aims, and they're every day. I wake up every morning thinking about that.
Let me ask you a question about nobility. It just struck me. None of those are things you have to do, but you choose to do. You could wake up and just watch TV or go for a walk or go out to lunch with your friends. I mean, you don't have to. You could put off your family to tomorrow. You could, I'll help the poor someday, and I'm not going to talk to the rest of the world or spread any message. Screw them.
Then I don't have one foot in that hole of discontent.
Yeah.
I don't have that one foot in the hole. And what I wanted to mention in my third point on this, as a result of doing all of these, my alcoholism is dealt with.
Yeah.
Because I have something other to do than drink away my pain,
right?
Cover my pain, mask my pain. My tremendous selfishness and pride are shot down regularly. It's not that they don't still occur, but those are shot down regularly as a result of these activities.
Because it's not about you all day long. We live in a world where it's all about me all day long.
And I'm trying to live in a world where our mystics call the false self or the small self, that is very ego-centered and trying to fill up and build up ourselves. And the only way we build up ourselves is to build up other people.
So does nobility mean getting outside of yourself and outside of your own selfishness?
I'm going to go into nobility in just a bit. Will you hold that question?
Okay.
Because I think that's a very, very important question. And so we come to the idea of attainment, and Peterson talks about that attainment of your goals is a diminishment of your goals. Once you attain this goal, you no longer have a goal.
You're not aspirational. You've realized it.
Yeah, and so they need to be consequential, that you can make results on them, you can make impacts on them, but they're lifelong goals. My spirituality will end beyond the day that I die. My service to the poor and disenfranchised, as Jesus said, we will always have the poor with us. That's not going to go away. I'm always going to have people. My needs for my family are always going to be there. New needs are always going to come up. And so I can satisfy moments, but I have moments to grow. I have moments to leverage, moments to learn, opportunities to become a better person.
Too many of us put these things on autopilot, though. Our relationships, our job, or we put them off till another day. I know you got a problem. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll deal with it tomorrow.
No, I don't. If I've got a problem, if there's a problem, we're on the phone, we're contacting, we're talking about it. Or, if nothing else, it goes to my prayers, knowing that talk will not do any good at this point. But I am fortunate with my belief in a higher power, in the Creator God. I can always go to this God for aid, and so it's always front of mind. Always front of mind. It's never back of mind. But I like this that we always need the goal of attainment. That it's sort of a Sisyphus sort of thing.
Sounds like it.
We're pushing it up,
push it up, and it rolls right back down.
Yeah, but that's okay. We push it up, but every time we push it up, it doesn't fall all the way back. We push it up further up the mountain than we did before. It's not the same push. That's the way I take it.
Well, it's the way people love to say in positive circles. Life's a journey. It's not a destination.
But it is, it is so trite, Paul, but it is so true.
Yeah.
It's so doggone true that life is a journey, but life is, I disagree that life is not a destination. Life is a series of many destinations,
Mm-hmm.
many, M-I-N-I,
Mm-hmm.
of small destinations that we achieve this destination to go to the next destination, to go to the next destination.
Milestones along
Milestones, thank
Yeah,
you. That's an
right.
excellent word. That's an excellent word. That works really well. And now, unless we somehow, in my opinion, address the answers of Peterson's 3 W's, we are likely facing some important, I'll get philosophical, some important existential discontentment. Unless we can define where we are headed, what we are doing to get there, and why we are getting there. Those are the questions that I think underwrite or pertain to the noble aims. And what are the questions? But the questions that remains about this requires discovering your noble aims. And please note, as I said earlier, you discover your noble aims. You don't create them. It's not that I'm going to go out and I'm going to take
it's not just
Bill Gates.
It's
Bill
not just
Gates'
time
noble
waster
aims.
stuff. I'm going to fill up my day. I need to do something, so I'm going to.
Or I read somebody that I really appreciate saying, "Oh man, those are good goals. I need to assume those goals."
Like his goals, right?
No. What are yours? And I listed 4 ways to identify yours, and
Please, because that's where my
are
father and I
dozens.
would fight. He'd say, "Well, I want to go find myself. I want to go find my purpose. I need a goal." And it's like, just get up and go to work. That's the goal.
Well, the first thing is understanding our life circumstances, and I think your father is a prime example. His life circumstances determined his goals,
Right.
and he discovered his goals through there. He didn't need to create any new goals, because through the pain and through the difficulties that he experienced, he had a fine goal of taking care of his family.
Yeah.
That is a noble aim in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very noble aim.
And it was more than that. I'll say this because it was the World War II generation, and I think he wasn't alone in doing this. He had an internal code. He knew what was right and wrong. He wouldn't. I'm not saying he was a perfect guy and he wouldn't bend the rules and all this stuff, but like in business, he used to say he was horrified later in life when he saw the meltdown of big companies, how they would cook the books and do all these things that were just outright crooked. There have been so many examples of them in the last 20, 30 years. And he said, I can't understand how to do that. How could they live with themselves? It's just wrong.
He had, what I'm going to add is my, as a 4th one right here, and that is an IGS. He had an internal guidance system.
Very much so.
And this is from our
Very
history
much so.
our history of experience, and I think it's the work of God, and I think it's the work of society that we live in, that we see what works, and we have this internal guidance system that is holy, and it is right, and it is good. And if we honor that internal guidance system, Dina Crowder labels this term internal guidance system.
Mm-hmm.
I used to call it the internal GPS, but I like the internal guidance system even better. That I think your father lived in accordance with that, and I think all of us have an internal guidance system, and it's essential to discover that and live according to that. What is our internal
But if
guidance
movies
system?
are a reflection of society, and I really believe that because I'm a big movie nut, I know you are too. You think of the movies that were made in my father's generation, and they were, the guy it was always one man against the world, and even though it wasn't the smartest thing to do, the easiest thing to do, he did what he thought was right, always, in the movie. The John Wayne kind of approach to life, or whatever. The westerns, one man against the world, standing up for what he thinks is right, even when it's not easy. today's, it's the hero is always complicated. The hero, it's not clear if he's a good guy or a bad guy, and he's never sure what he should do next.
Well, because the small H hero, I think has a much better internal guidance system because he is so much less influenced by power structures that determine his goals, such as our leaders at the top today have so many other impacts and impetuses that determine what their IPS is, their IGS is. And we live in a world which seems to be, it's what you can get away with. It's not what's right or wrong, it's what you can get away with. How much can you fudge? How much can you fidget? How much can you get away with? And if you get away with it, then it's good. If you don't get away with it, it's bad. I would encourage readers our listeners who happen to read my blogs to check my blog from last week, which was on leaders with character. Yeah, that's to me, you and Terry talked about that. I think that was to me what my father had tremendous character, and men of his generation did too. They had an internal guidance system that even if it wasn't always in their benefit, they said, okay, I know everybody else is doing this. I probably could get away with it, but I can't. I can't live with myself. It's wrong in my view. There is a code. And that Jordan Peterson seems to harken back to that sort of internal code, that man code of what you should do and shouldn't do. And it comes from within you. It doesn't come from without. It can't be imposed upon you. That's why he hates the difference between equality of opportunity, where we can all do, versus the equality of outcome. Yes, that's huge. I mean, that's a huge distinction, and that in itself is a podcast fleshing that. That would be a fascinating show. You should talk about that. Well, yeah, I'm not expert in it. So we're looking at our life circumstances, our internal guidance system, and then, another thing to help us discover our noble aim is our most valued associations. With whom do we associate and align ourselves to? You're known by the company you keep. And so that is people and institutions like the church. The fading away church, and I believe the institutional church has in many ways failed us today, and yet the institutional church has given us guidelines, has given us ideas of what might be good and not so good. And what do you do? I was another rabbit hole, but we've talked about in modern society, nobody dies; they just pass away, and we have no services and we have no ceremonies. And we just want to get it over with. We lose some. We don't know what to do in those moments. The churches of the past, whatever they were, gave you some guidance. They gave you some, not just rules of behavior, but kind of helped you through moments like that. That is one of the reasons I am not a Catholic, and I have difficulties with some of the theology of Catholic churches, although I am drifting towards a mystic in Catholicism. I've appreciated the Catholic Church, even though I disagree with their views of marriage. They say the tradition goes back so long that they're not going to stray from this tradition. Right. I don't know. In Catholic churches, do we see such type of funeral activities in the Catholic Church as we do in the Protestant Church? I can only tell you that when my mom died, when my dad died, my aunt died, each time they wanted the full-blown Catholic Mass, and all my friends groaned, all of our family groaned, everybody moaned and said, oh my God, we don't want to go through. It's horrible, it's hideous, let's just get it over with. They want the celebration of life, the 15-minute, and then let's get to the party. And I said, but you've got to go through the grief to get there. And these ceremonies, whether they seem hard to deal with or whatever, draconian, they did a purpose. The grief advocates, oh golly, what is her name? Pauline Boss, who, the writer of Ambiguous Losses, who's really talks about loss and grief, and just said the essential nature of the grief process, that if we lose the grief process, we we really prolong ambiguous loss, that the loss is never closed, although closed or resolved, until we go through this.
Yeah, right. I once, and all of them were out in the desert. They all got buried through forest lawn. And I asked the directors there, I said, what is the norm these days? He said, we're going out of business. Nobody has funerals anymore. Nobody, forget about the old-fashioned ones where you go to the grave and you lower them in the casket and all that. That's way gone. Nobody even has caskets anymore. But there's no funerals. There's a celebration of life. It's 15 minutes, and then let's get over with it and on to something else. It's very quick. It's very superficial. There's not much. There's nothing to follow. It's sort of ad hoc. You make it up. Anybody want to say anything here? Okay, not.
Yeah, I can't imagine for me going to a family member that is close to me and I have some impact on how the funeral is going to go, that I can't go to a grave site and take a handful of dirt and put it on the grave.
Nobody does that. They look at my friends would say, "Oh, that's hideous. That's horrible. Oh my God, we're not going to go through that. Oh, geez, who wants to do that?" You need to go through some of that. I found, because it guides you through it and it gets you through it and it forces you through it. Otherwise, it is just let's put it aside and get back to living here.
How do you think let's do full circle on this, Paul? Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea of how this relates to noble aim?
Well, I guess I'm just saying that there was part of it was a nobility of purpose. I wasn't just doing it for me. Again, if in a world where it's all about me, then I'm not going to go through all that. It was also about honoring them. It was also about acknowledging who they were and what their wishes were, and to make it add some meaning to this. What doesn't seem meaningless, they're gone. All of that was an attempt to reach for something beyond that. I think you're aiming at here. Nobility is reaching to some greater purpose here than just getting through it today.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's very helpful. So my four suggestions of discovery, not creating our noble aims, understanding our life circumstances and how they impact what our noble aims are, understanding our internal guidance system and how that drives us to who we are, our valued associations with people and institutions and how they impact us. And finally, there's this element of our psychology. We are hardwired psychologically, and without getting into the depths of it, I know there are several instruments that are not that expensive, that are very helpful in helping us understand what our what our psychological proclivities are. And there's one that's the DISC, the DISC.
Yes, right.
That my wife is a very strong advocate of.
Right, because she's a coach and whatnot.
Yeah, and then the other one is the Enneagram, that just sort of gives us an idea. This is what moves us. This is what motivates us, and can kind of, I think all of these things together can help us not create but discover, this is who I am. Who am I at the core, and how can I honor my core self in service to humanity and truly in self-service and making my life a meaningful life, a life that makes a difference to me, that I can awake in the morning refreshed and not dilapidated.
You want us to find our core. I'll leave you with a depressing thought. I worry that too many people today have no core. At the core, there's nothing there. It's just fungible. It's all. There isn't a solid set of beliefs. There isn't a solid set of guidance. There isn't one direction you can go. It's all, situational ethics. It's all what works and what doesn't work. It's not deep. It's shallow. I'm not sure there's a deep core from it. I don't say that lightly. I remember having this discussion with my daughter when she was a teenager, and I said, tried to get her to talk about this seriously, and she just rolled her eyes. I said, what is at your core? What are the things you just believe in that nobody can shake you out of? I don't care if the whole crowd is smoking dope or the whole crowd's doing something. What are those things that you just ain't going to go along with? Because that ain't you. And she's like, I don't know. I thought, I was horrified. That means if in the right circumstance, she could do just about anything. In the right crowd, if everybody else is doing it, if everybody else is going along with it. There wasn't that, she didn't immediately spit out, well, I would never, would you cheat? Would you steal? Would you hurt somebody? Would you, given the right circumstances, I think a lot of people today would do just about anything. I don't know that we have that same strength rock of character that we used to cherish so much here. Now maybe that's just me and feeling old.
No, I think you're bringing up a really good point, and I think we have slipped into in the United States in our I'm not a big fan necessarily. I'm a huge fan, but I'm not an over advocating of the American dream because of the bastardization of the American dream.
Right.
And that
it's about things and accomplishment.
And it used to be all about hard work,
right? And
now it's about entitlement.
Yes, and it used to be about values, and now it's about the values aren't as important as the acquisition or the accumulation or
accumulation, and
consumer society. Consume more.
The what was it? The accolades.
Yes, right.
That we get for
love.
This is
right.
This is a silent. Although I've gone and I'm really kind of embarrassed that I told my goals because these are very private. And,
yes, right.
And I only work on them privately. I don't talk to other people about them. I don't talk to others. I just wanted to give examples to people of.
But that was the example of my father. He was the strong silent type. He was the embodiment of all those John Wayne movies, those Westerns that he loved. And again, they never talked about this stuff. My dad didn't talk about this stuff. But deep down, he had a core, and it was unshakable. It was unshakable. Even if it didn't help him, even if everybody else was doing it, there were certain things he just wouldn't do.
Well, I'll tell you in closing.
Or would do, yeah.
I have a feeling that if we pursue a noble aim, it not only allows us to experience life at its fullest, but it gives the opportunity to transform our life into something significant.
Yes.
Noble aim is a transformative power. Paul, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's always a delight to chat, and I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and please be sure to check us out at our website, thenextchapter.life. Until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.